Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. It's nice to be here. It's my first OSMC. And Nuremberg is a wonderful place. Thanks, NETWAYS, for organizing this. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So today we'll be looking at how we can automate incident response. This applies to all kinds of risks, not just cloud native. We'll go over some examples and some things of what's wrong today in this space, and then how we can improve that going forwards. So my name is Simar. I work on the open source team at Aqua. These are my Twitter handles. And yeah, if you would like to get in touch, please ping me. So the lay of the land is where we start. I want to kind of set a stage of what there is today in this space and where the challenges lie, and how we can improve that. We'll do a quick demo of the things that I'm going to talk about, and then we'll wrap it up. So you might have heard of the following things. That security is a need, not an option. We must shift left, something that is quite trendy these days to say. And the infamous 0 days where you have to patch everything ASAP and everything is on fire. So having said that, let's take a step back and see what is security, like what does it mean to be secure? And if you just type that into Google and see the result, it says that it's a state of being free from danger or any kind of threat. So ideally, if you translate that into our realm, it would imply that we want to be in a place where we know what we have is relatively secure, and the threat of having something pop up is low. Of course, we cannot guarantee 100% security because that doesn't exist. But at least we can get to a place where we're better off than what we have today. So how do we do that? Is the next question you might ask. So if you take a look at the cloud native landscape, these are all the projects that identify themselves as part of being as part of CNCF, and it's quite a lot. And this list keeps growing every year. If you were to take a step back and kind of see how many of these are actually security projects, you'll be surprised that the ones that are on the screen marked in red are, there for doing security or some kind of observability or monitoring purpose. And it's quite a bit. And you could say, tomorrow that I'm going to use all these. The more of them I have in my workflow, the more of them I have in my pipeline, the more secure I'll get. But that is not true. You'll probably end up shooting yourself in the foot using more security projects just for the sake of it. Have to manage all of them, have to configure them. And the other key piece of what is in security is basically making a product so secure that your users just can't use it. I mean, that would really suck, that you have to put in a password that identifies certain combinations, and yeah, your users ultimately end up getting frustrated. But the key piece I want to talk here for this conference is alert management for operators. A lot of times we see that companies will enforce policies in place and have directives of how they want to manage security, and this ultimately ends up putting a lot of strain and burden on the people that are managing, like you and I, of these services. And you essentially end up becoming a monkey kind of trying to manage all these alerts that are coming, that are flooding in to your phone, let's say in the middle of the night, and trying to manage them as the best you can. So that is something certainly we don't want to see ourselves doing. So I was trying to find content for this talk and trying to present this talk better, and I ran into this Reddit post. Pretty harrowing if you ask me what it describes. Someone started working on monitoring team, and they have PagerDuty anxiety and all kinds of problems. I personally identify myself with this as well. In a previous job, I was on such a team, and I would have anxiety just going on water to row to hope my phone doesn't blow up, and if it does, trying to find the nearest exit of how I can get off the water and trying to manage that page that I just got. So this is pretty awful, and I don't think anyone wants to be here. So certainly, one thing that we can establish is that alert fatigue is certainly real. We don't want to, see ourselves in situations like these, where, yeah. So I would like to pitch in a series of blogs that our friends at PagerDuty have written. They're probably the best people to talk about alert fatigue and the challenges that are associated in this space. This is a pretty nice series of blogs that they've written, and they've also written ways to manage alert fatigue. Some of those points I will talk about today in this talk. So TLDR is we need to do better. Status quo is pretty bad. The more services we are writing, the more services we are managing. The more code, the more bugs, the more pages. Yeah. So, speaking of alerts, you've probably received an alert and you've hoped that it had these properties in it, that you got a page that was actionable. You know exactly, or to an extent, what you need to do with it. It is descriptive. You can tell and feel what it wants you to do, what it's trying to describe to you. And the most important piece being that it goes to the right people. You don't want to be in a place where you get a page and basically it's unactionable because you're not the right team or not the right person to handle it. And yeah, that is an unfortunate situation for everyone, because now there's a page that is unattended, and also it's disturbed you as it has gone to you, and you're not the right person to handle it. So if you just add one more thing to this list of items, in my definition, it becomes ideal. A lot of essentially the 4 things that you see on the top of being automated are things that can be automated. If you are going to do alert management yourself, you're going to take that action. Why not automate that playbook? Not only it tells you what the action should be, it forces you to define that action ahead of time to essentially say, well, if X happens, then do Y. And certainly machines can handle thresholds better than us, whether it be stress or anything else. What is, alert automation, I guess, in broader terms? Stuff that is self-healing, resolves itself. If you're familiar with Ansible and the other kinds of playbooks that you have, essentially automating a set of key items that you wish you didn't have to deal with in the middle of the night are, good candidates for something like that. So, if you take a look at this graph, this is a few years old until now, and it talks about like how essentially the term incident response has grown over in popularity and interest over time. Certainly makes sense. As new services are coming up, more management of them has to be done. The virtuous cycle of having more code, more bugs, and there is interest growing in this space. That clearly demonstrates that we also need to handle the other side of things, which is operator fatigue and automation. So wouldn't it be better if we could classify these into a single category, and essentially in that space we'll have like a way to talk about them and basically be able to discuss and better classify such things. So lo and behold, there is something like that. It's just not hot enough today, but I hope it does get at some point, which is called SOAR. It is an acronym that stands for Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. Basically, the entire set of things from the input, the generation of the event, when the problem actually happens, all the way to how to respond to it and take care of it is what is covered under SOAR. It is not a new thing, as I mentioned, and it's been there for a while. And yeah, things are starting to look good. As you've seen in the previous graph, things are starting to trend up. So if you're a visual learner like me, this might be better to take into account and sort of visualize of what SOAR is. So SOAR kind of sits in the middle of all these technologies that we have today, your vulnerability scanners, your antivirus, your firewalls, any kind of system that produces an alert to tell you something is wrong is a good candidate for a SOAR software project. So you could have whatever alert that you want to send it, if you're sending that alert to a human, to a monitoring or alert management team, you could take it into SOAR, and SOAR is going to essentially triage and do an analysis of like what essentially you would do when you get a page, and classify them as a severity and respond on them, in a variety of actions. Something which is quite important, I feel, because not every page is the same. There's certain things that need to be dealt with urgently, and some things that can wait over the weekend. So something like a SOAR project can help you do that. So how can we SOAR? I mean, we could get wings and we can do that, but there are some existing implementations. One of them I will talk in this talk, something that we've worked on, which is Postee. There's Shuffle, Tines, and many more. Postee is open source, so is Tines, I believe, but yeah, there are many open source implementations of SOAR projects available today. So without further ado, I will introduce and talk about Postee. To put things into perspective, in a nutshell, Postee is a routing system. You get stuff in, you do triage analysis, and you get stuff out. As simple as that. It is a policy-based routing system, which means you can define your logic ahead of time to know what you expect and what you don't expect, and handle those things appropriately. We will talk about the policy stuff later on in the talk. And you're essentially defining enforcement for your stuff. What do you want to do if you get something as an alert? So we take the previous diagram and put Postee into place. Basically, it sits right where it's supposed to be with all the SOAR projects. You can have any kind of input, as I mentioned. In this case, I'm showing a couple of our other open source projects, one of them being Trivy, which is a vulnerability scanner, and Tracy being the runtime scanner. But you're not limited to those. You can have anything that generates you an event. Take it into Postee, write your policy, what you want to do with it, and yeah, off to the races with whatever kind of response you want to have. So to dumb it down even more, if you don't get anything out of this presentation, hopefully you can remember this. You take your favorite tool, you get an alert, send it to Postee. Postee sends it off to other things like Jira, Slack, or whatever. So how can it help you? Field alerts, automate playbooks, reducing the overall operator overload that we're facing. So to set the stage, let's take a look at a couple of examples of like how you can use Postee with other tools. I'm going to talk about two of them. First one being Trivy. It's an open source vulnerability scanner. So you can kind of get an idea of what kind of things that you expect Trivy to send as an event or an alert. You can get vulnerability information from your container images, misconfiguration of your clusters with Kubernetes, secret detection on a file system or a Git repository, scanning for malicious licenses or obscure licenses if you want to do that kind of compliance. So the way it will work is if you look at the flowchart here, Trivy is going to scan. In this case, we're talking about scanning a Docker image. It is going to produce results, which are essentially the output that it has, and it's instead of sending it to an operator in the command line, it can send it to Postee over a webhook. Postee takes that. It has logic defined ahead of time to deal with what to do in case of vulnerable images, and also it has a logic defined to what action to take when you get such an alert. So in this case, we do update the base image, but we can do other things as well. So hopefully this will work. Okay, it does. All right, cool. So on the right side, you can see configuration of Postee. It's a YAML file. We'll go over this later on, but I've started Postee. It's running fielding for events. On the middle, I have Trivy scanning an Alpine 310 image. Lots of vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are essentially, the output of Trivy. It's sent to standard out, but also to Postee on the right. And then Postee has a logic to essentially create a ticket for you so that you can come back on Monday and fix that image or update it so that the vulnerabilities are gone. So you can see in almost real time, it created a ticket with the information that Trivy generated, tagged it, assigned it to me, of course. Yeah, that is an example of what you can do with Trivy and Postee together. You can certainly use anything else that gives you the same output as Trivy did, and do the same action as you did with Postee here. So, oops. Okay. So another example is Tracy. Tracy is another open source tool. This is a little different in terms of alerts that will generate. This is a runtime scanning tool, also open source. And essentially, we're looking at malicious behavior inside of your workloads using eBPF. So once you get an alert, Tracy can send it to Postee, and Postee can manage that. So simpler example will be something like this, where you're running Tracy on your workload, and someone has executed a malicious process on the same workload. Tracy, using the power of eBPF, determines that that is malicious. It did something that it was not supposed to do. Could be anything like magic write or fileless execution, whatever you think and deem to be malicious using the Tracy signatures can be classified as such. Tracy generated an event to Postee, and Postee terminated that process. So essentially enforcing the execution of what you would have done to maybe take down that host or decommission that server, whatever it might be. So quick demo again. Okay. So on the right side, you can see configuration of Postee again. It is scanning for, looking for signatures from Tracy. In this case, it's looking for malicious behavior of like a process running, and also looking at something going wrong within a Kubernetes environment. So it has like two inputs that it's kind of expecting to see. Details don't matter for the purposes of this demo. On the middle, you'll see Tracy is running probing stuff on the host that it's running. This by intention is kind of set up so that there are things going wrong. So in this case, there's a service that is using your Kubernetes service token to essentially do stuff. So Tracy detected that, sent it to Postee, and then Postee in this case is wired up to send it to a webhook. Could be, anything like a PagerDuty alert or whatever it might be, and sends all the details that it gets from Tracy, tells you exactly what happened, what should have, how you can mitigate and that kind of stuff. It has a JSON payload. And then another thing we can do is basically run strace to kind of demonstrate what someone malicious might do. Strace generated syscalls on the host. Those syscalls triggered Tracy to generate an event. That event went to Postee, and then Postee was told to create a Jira ticket. Who doesn't love Jira? There we have the Tracy event inside of Jira as a ticket for you to come take a look. The idea here is that you can wire up things like that, that's kind of the goal here. So as I mentioned earlier, let's dive into how to configure Postee. So it's pretty simple. It's declarative using a YAML file. You configure routes of like what you define as like an incoming event of different things. So in this case, I've defined a tribute operator, which is essentially running tribute inside of Kubernetes, and that operator is going to send me reports, and I'm interested in if those reports have any critical vulnerabilities, and if so, I define an action to take. In this case, send me a Slack message. And we have some templates so that you don't have to work your way out to be able to use these integrations like the one we have at Slack. So you can take your input and you can essentially use the template so that Postee knows how to send it to Slack. There's a bunch of templates we have that you can use. And as for the action, so templates are also defined there. As for the actions, we define what it does. In this case, it sends a Slack message. We put in a URL to a Slack webhook, that's as simple as that. One thing to note here: the input is actually a policy. So that will be the next thing that I will talk about. Postee, as I mentioned, is a policy-based system, so you can define your policies ahead of time. We use Rego and OPA as an engine to kind of evaluate those policies based on the input events that you're getting. So it's flexible in the sense that you can essentially take policies from anywhere and use them for evaluation within Postee. And we do have a bunch of templates that you can use today to use as policies as part of Postee. So that's the configuration and the policy side of things. The other equation is what happens in terms of actions. Like what does Postee do when it gets something and something is evaluated as true? Today we have these. You're certainly not limited to these. They're pretty lightweight, have an easy to define interface. Don't take my word for it. Go try it out. I will show you the interface that I'm talking here as to why it's easy. So as I mentioned, these are the outputs. Certainly welcome more if you have or want to expand on them. We also have a very basic UI. These are kind of the actions configured. So you can see all of them here. You can also add an action using the UI if you wish. And this is the interface that I was talking about. Postee is a Go project, so If you want to write a new integration, and we welcome you to do so, you really need to define these 5 methods. And as long as you have those, you essentially have a new integration in place. So sorry, it was a little rushed, but in any case, if you have questions or want to work to make this feel better, please, all pull requests are welcome for Postee or any of the other open source projects that we've talked about today. We certainly look forward to your contributions. And my Twitter handle and GitHub handles are part of the slide, so you'll have that as well. Lastly, thank you everyone for attending this talk, and I wish you the best for the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Sima, for this interesting presentation. We will open the floor now for questions. So if you have any questions, I will come over to you with the microphone and hand it over. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Thank you for this talk. I'm trying to understand the inputs. It's basically, Postee is basically just a webhook that receives any probably JSON input, and you then use the Rego template language to act on the contents and do these actions, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
So it's very simple. It just takes inputs, and then evaluates using a policy. That's Rego.
Okay. Thank you.
Yourself, don't forget coffee. Yourself.